Have you ever noticed how history seems to, like, rhyme? Like, are we constantly repeating the same mistakes, driven by the same emotions and desires?
Yeah.
Well, today we're diving into Morgan Housel's Same as It Ever Was.
Hmm.
It's a book that explores these timeless patterns of human behavior and unearths some surprising insights about how they shape the world around us.
You know what's so compelling about Housel's approach is that he doesn't try to predict the future, which, as we all know, is a fool's errand, right?
Right.
Instead, he focuses on the constants of human nature, our reactions to risk, our ever-shifting expectations, even the quirks of brilliant minds,
Oh,
and
interesting.
how those constants play out across different eras and circumstances.
So it's like he's saying that to understand where we're going, we need to understand where we've been,
Yeah.
and more importantly, who we are.
Exactly. And one of the most striking themes he explores is this idea that risk is often what you don't see coming. We tend to be pretty good at predicting the obvious, the things that are already on our radar.
It's the surprises, right? The events that catch us completely off guard. Those are the things that really shake things up.
Think about it. COVID-19, 9/11, the Great Depression. These were all massive events that very few people saw coming.
Yeah. Nobody saw those coming.
Housel even points out that The Economist, with its yearly forecasts, they often miss the biggest events precisely because they're unexpected. Like,
Oh.
we're driving down the road looking straight ahead, but the real danger is the blind spot we never check.
Oh, wow. That's a great analogy.
Mm.
So thinking about this, what are the unknown unknowns, right, in your own life or
Mm.
your career? What risks are lurking just beyond your current understanding?
Right.
Are you prepared for the unexpected?
Preparing for the unexpected, that is a challenge for sure.
Yeah.
It's about cultivating a wider imagination, constantly questioning your assumptions, and considering scenarios that might seem far-fetched at first glance. But those far-fetched scenarios, the ones we don't prepare for, are often the ones that have the biggest impact.
Another theme Helsel digs into is this constant tug of war between expectations and reality.
All right.
You know, that feeling that no matter how much things improve, we always seem to want more.
He uses this really interesting example, nostalgia for the 1950s. We tend to romanticize that era as like a golden age, but objectively, many things are better now.
Hmm.
Home ownership rates are higher, wages are better adjusted for inflation, and food is more affordable. And yet there's this persistent feeling that it was a simpler, happier time.
Yeah, I can see that. It's easy to get caught up in the idea of a simpler past, especially when the present feels so complex. But if everything gets better and better materially, shouldn't we feel better and better too?
Logically, yes. But Housel argues that our perception of reality is often more powerful than reality itself.
Wow.
He even quotes Charlie Munger, who famously said, "The world is driven by envy, not greed."
Mm.
We're constantly comparing ourselves to others, and this leads to ever-rising expectations.
It's like a treadmill, right?
Yeah.
You're running faster and faster, but never quite getting anywhere. You know, you're working hard, maybe even seeing some success. But then you look around and see someone else who seems to be doing better, achieving more, and suddenly your own accomplishments feel less significant.
And this idea of constantly comparing ourselves is actually deeply rooted in our psychology. There's a concept called social comparison theory, which explains how we evaluate ourselves and our abilities in relation to others. It's part of being human, but it can also be a recipe for dissatisfaction if we're not careful.
Especially in today's world with social media. It's got a highlight reel of everyone else's best moments,
Yeah.
curated to trigger those feelings of envy and inadequacy.
Right.
It can be tough to stay grounded when you're constantly bombarded with images of other people's seemingly perfect lives.
Absolutely. So what can we do about it?
Yeah.
Housel suggests that managing our expectations is key. We need to be realistic about the trade-offs and challenges that come with success, because even when we achieve great things, our expectations often rise right along with our circumstances. We might find ourselves achieving a goal we've been working towards for years, only to feel this fleeting sense of relief rather than lasting joy.
Right, like you're not as excited as you thought you would be.
Yeah.
It makes me think about that Charlie Munger quote, "A happy life starts with low expectations."
Yeah.
Of course, he's not saying we shouldn't have ambitions or goals, but rather that finding contentment requires a certain level of acceptance of what is, rather than constantly chasing what could be.
Exactly. Now, Housel also delves into the fascinating world of what he calls wild minds,
Yeah.
the unique individuals who think in ways that both inspire and baffle us. And he makes this intriguing point that people who think in ways we admire often also think in ways we don't admire.
It's like those brilliant artists or innovators who are known for their uh, unconventional thinking, their willingness to push boundaries, but who also have reputations for being like difficult, eccentric, or even downright destructive.
He uses the example of Eliud Kipchoge, the world's best marathoner, known for his incredible focus and discipline.
Hmm.
Kipchoge meditates for hours, avoids distractions like his phone, and adheres to a strict training regimen. But Housel raises this question, is this admirable dedication?
Yeah.
Or is it a sign of someone who's perhaps a little too detached from the normal joys and distractions of life?
It's a fascinating question, isn't it? Where do we draw the line between genius and eccentricity?
Yeah.
Between extraordinary talent and potentially unhealthy obsession?
And Housel doesn't stop there.
Okay.
He explores this idea with other examples, John Boyd, the brilliant but volatile fighter pilot who revolutionized aerial combat, but was also like a near sociopath who nearly got court-martialed,
Right.
and Isaac Newton, the genius who gave us the laws of motion, but was also obsessed with alchemy and the occult. It really makes you think about the complexities of brilliance and the fine line between genius and madness.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's a reminder that we should avoid putting our role models on pedestals.
Yeah.
We need to recognize that unique minds often come with both strengths and weaknesses.
Hmm.
And separating the two can be extremely difficult. After all, who hasn't been disappointed to find that their hero had feet of clay?
It's about embracing the whole package,
Yeah.
the good and the bad, and understanding that even the most brilliant minds are still human, with all the flaws and contradictions that come with being human.
This actually leads perfectly into another impactful section of the book, The Power of Storytelling.
Mm.
Housel argues that even if you have the right information, the way you communicate it can make all the difference.
Right.
Right.
He uses some fantastic examples to illustrate this point. Mark Twain, for instance,
Right.
would only keep passages in his writing that elicited a strong emotional reaction from his family.
Hmm.
He understood that a story's impact lies not just in the facts it presents, but in its ability to connect with people on an emotional level.
Right.
Then there's Yuval Noah Harari, author of the best-selling *Sapiens*.
Oh, yeah. Great book.
He readily admits that his book didn't present any new information, but rather packaged existing knowledge about human history in a captivating way. It was the storytelling, the narrative arc, that made it a global phenomenon.
So it's not just what you say, it's how you say it.
Exactly. And let's not forget Ken Burns, whose documentaries, they breathe new life into well-known historical events through meticulous storytelling and impactful music choices.
Yeah, those are great.
He understands that by weaving a compelling narrative and evoking emotions, we can create a deeper understanding and appreciation for even the most familiar subjects.
It's fascinating how a well-told story can, shape our understanding of events, even change our minds, right? But here's the thing. Humans aren't always rational. Sometimes our emotions and gut feelings lead us down unexpected paths, defying logic and reason.
And that leads us to a really thought-provoking chapter, Does Not Compute. Housel argues that the world is not a spreadsheet. Human emotions, incentives, and irrationality play a huge role in shaping outcomes, often in ways that our neat and tidy models fail to capture.
He brings up the Battle of the Bulge, where Hitler's decisions, fueled by desperation and delusion, defied all logic and caught the Allies off guard.
Or John Nash, the brilliant mathematician who also struggled with schizophrenia and believed aliens were sending him messages. It highlights the fact that genius and irrationality can often go hand in hand.
That is fascinating.
And then there's A.V. Hill,
Okay.
the Nobel-winning physiologist who demonstrated that the limits of human performance are often mental, not physical.
Oh, interesting.
His research showed that when the mind gives up, the body follows suit,
Wow.
regardless of physical capability.
So we're much stronger than we think we are.
What's so important about this concept is that it helps us understand unexpected outcomes and seemingly irrational behavior. We crave certainty and predictability, but the world is messy and unpredictable. Acknowledging this inherent messiness, the role of emotions and irrationality, allows us to better navigate the complexities of human behavior.
So we can't always rely on logic and data alone to predict how things will play out.
Right.
There's this human element that throws a wrench in the works, making things both fascinating and frustratingly unpredictable.
Exactly. And this leads us to another concept that Housel explores in depth. Too much, too soon, too fast. He argues that there are limits to scaling and that a good idea on steroids can quickly become a terrible idea.
It seems like we're always trying to, speed things up, push harder, grow faster. But as Housel points out, sometimes the best approach is to slow down and let things unfold at their own pace.
He uses a really interesting range of examples to illustrate this point. He talks about Robert Wadlow, the tallest man in history, who tragically died young due to complications from his extreme height. It's a stark reminder that there are limits to scaling, even in the natural world.
Yeah, I guess there are physical limits to everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm.
And he brings it back to the business world with examples like Starbucks over expansion, where they ended up cannibalizing their own sales by opening too many stores too quickly.
Hmm.
Or Uber's cultural issues under Travis Kalanick, where the relentless pursuit of growth led to a toxic work environment.
Makes sense.
It's a reminder that growth for the sake of growth isn't always sustainable, and that pushing too hard too fast can have negative consequences. Sometimes, a slower, more measured approach leads to greater long-term success.
It's like that saying, slow and steady wins the race. It's not always the most glamorous approach, but it's often the most effective. And this ties in really nicely with another theme from the book. When the magic happens, Housel argues that the biggest changes often happen after a terrible event, not during good times. It's like we need that jolt of hardship to shake us out of our complacency and force us to innovate and adapt.
That's interesting. So, we do better when things are bad.
He brings up the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire as a powerful example. This horrific tragedy where over 100 garment workers lost their lives led to huge advancements in worker safety and rights. It took a terrible tragedy to spark meaningful change.
It's things have to get really bad for people to finally pay attention and try to fix things.
And think about the role of militaries in driving innovation. The urgency of wartime problems, the literal life or death stakes, often lead to incredible progress in remarkably short periods of time. Necessity really is the mother of invention.
Right, because if you don't innovate, you die.
It's almost counterintuitive, right? You'd think that innovation would flourish during times of peace and prosperity, when people have the time and resources to experiment and explore.
Yeah, that makes sense. You would think that.
But Housel argues that hardship, with all its challenges and difficulties, can be a powerful motivator for problem solving and progress.
So it's not about, wishing for hardship. It's recognizing that it can be a catalyst for growth and change.
And speaking of change, there's another really interesting concept that Housel explores. Overnight tragedies, long-term miracles. He points out that good news often compounds slowly, while bad news can strike instantly. For instance, heart disease death rates have declined dramatically since the 1950s, but it happened gradually, so it's not something we celebrate or even really notice.
Right. It's like this slow, steady growth of a tree. We don't see it happening day to day, but over time it can become this towering presence.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. We focus on the bad news because it's right in front of us. Exactly, and economic growth is another great example. We've seen incredible gains over time, but it's easy to overlook that progress in the short term when we're, bombarded with news about market fluctuations and economic anxieties.
This highlights the importance of patience and long-term thinking, and the dangers of neglecting gradual progress in favor of sensational headlines. It's about, zooming out and looking at the bigger picture, recognizing the trends that are shaping our world, even if they're not always obvious or immediately apparent.
Now, one of the things that struck me most about The Same as It Ever Was is how Housel emphasizes the need for both optimism and pessimism to coexist if we want to make genuine progress. He calls it elation and despair. And it's this fascinating dance between believing things can get better and accepting that the path to getting there will likely be full of setbacks and surprises.
Oh, that's so interesting, because I feel like we're always told to be positive and optimistic, right? But he's saying we need both.
It's like that saying, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. You need that belief that things can improve, that spark of optimism to fuel your efforts. But you also need a healthy dose of pessimism to keep you grounded and help you anticipate potential challenges.
So it's not about ignoring the bad stuff. It's about acknowledging it and planning for it.
He illustrates this beautifully with the story of James Stockdale, the Vietnam POW who survived years of brutal captivity.
Oh, wow.
Stockdale said he never lost faith that he would eventually be freed. But he also acknowledged the harsh reality of his situation every single day.
So he had hope, but he was also realistic.
He didn't sugarcoat things or pretend everything was fine.
He faced the darkness head on while still holding on to that sliver of hope for the future. That's incredible resilience.
It really is. And it speaks to the importance of finding that balance between optimism and pessimism. It's not about being blindly optimistic or resigning yourself to a negative outlook, but rather recognizing that both perspectives have their place.
Right, so it's not about choosing one or the other, but rather embracing the tension between the two. It's like that saying, save like a pessimist, invest like an optimist.
Yeah.
You prepare for the worst, but you don't let that fear paralyze you. You still take calculated risks and pursue opportunities with the belief that things can improve.
And Housel also points out how the American dream itself gained popularity during the Great Depression when it seemed least attainable.
Mm.
People needed something to believe in, a vision of a brighter future, even when their present circumstances were, like, incredibly difficult.
Yeah, it's like when things are really bad, we need to hold on to something to, keep us going.
That really speaks to the power of hope, doesn't it? Even in the darkest of times, it can fuel our resilience and drive us forward.
And then there's Bill Gates, who, even at the height of Microsoft's success, insisted on having enough cash on hand to survive a year with no revenue.
He called it his paranoia. But it was really just a healthy dose of pessimism that allowed him to plan for unexpected challenges.
Right. So even when things are going well, it's important to stay grounded and anticipate potential setbacks. It's about finding that balance between confidence and caution, which, let's face it, can be tricky.
Absolutely. Now, another chapter that really resonated with me is casualties of perfection. Housel uses evolution as a powerful analogy here. He talks about how evolution favors bigger animals, but also punishes those who get too big. Advantage, it seems, is fleeting.
It's like that saying, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. You reach a certain level of success, become the dominant player in your field, and then suddenly you're vulnerable. The very things that made you successful can become your downfall if you're not careful.
Exactly. And he uses the rise and fall of Sears as a cautionary tale of what happens when a company becomes complacent and fails to adapt.
Oh yeah, Sears. They were like everywhere when I was a kid. They had everything from clothing and appliances to tools and even houses. But they ultimately became a victim of their own success, unable to keep up with changing consumer preferences and new competition.
It's a stark reminder that past success is no guarantee of future success, and that we need to constantly evolve and adapt to stay ahead of the curve. And this leads us to a really powerful chapter that I think is particularly relevant to our modern world. It's supposed to be hard.
Hmm. Interesting. We live in a culture obsessed with quick fixes and instant gratification. We want the easy path, the shortcut to success. But as Housel argues, the allure of shortcuts is powerful, but dangerous. Real progress, the kind that leads to lasting fulfillment and meaning, often requires enduring hardship and embracing the struggle.
Yeah, it's like we've been sold this idea that success should be easy, that if we just follow the right formula or find the right hack, we can bypass the struggle and achieve our goals effortlessly. But as Helza reminds us, that's rarely how it works in reality.
He uses the tragic story of the Donner Party as a chilling example.
Oh, wow. The Donner Party. They were pioneers heading west, and they decided to take this shortcut that ultimately led to them being trapped in the Sierra Nevada mountains during winter. The result was a harrowing tale of survival, with many succumbing to starvation and exposure.
That's a stark reminder that shortcuts often come with hidden costs, and that the most rewarding paths, the ones that lead to genuine growth and resilience, often require enduring hardship and embracing the struggle.
Precisely. It's a message that can be applied to any area of life, our careers, our relationships, our personal growth. The things that are truly worth having, they often require us to push ourselves beyond our comfort zones, face our fears, and persevere through difficult times.
So it's not about, seeking out hardship for its own sake,
Yeah.
but recognizing that it's an inevitable part of the journey.
And this ties in beautifully with the final chapter, Wounds Heal, Scars Last. Housel argues that we rebuild after setbacks, but the impact of those experiences shapes our thinking forever. He uses World War II as a powerful example.
Yeah, World War II. I mean,
Yeah.
millions endured unimaginable hardships during that conflict.
And while physical wounds may have healed, the psychological scars,
Yeah.
the memories, the trauma, it continued to shape their lives long after the war ended.
It's the past is always with us in some way.
It's a reminder that our experiences, both positive and negative, they shape who we are
Yeah.
and how we see the world.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's not just about what happens to us, but how we interpret those experiences,
Uh,
how we integrate them into our personal narratives.
And it encourages us to consider how our own unique experiences, have shaped our perspectives, and to recognize that those who have endured different hardships may think and act differently than we do.
It's a call for empathy and understanding,
Right.
recognizing that our individual journeys shape our worldviews,
Mm-hmm.
and that those worldviews can differ dramatically based on the paths we've walked.
And, what really stayed with me from this book is that final provocative thought that Housel leaves us with. It's a question, and I think we should all be asking ourselves this regularly, especially when we encounter someone who sees the world differently than we do. What have you experienced that I haven't that makes you believe what you do? And would I think about the world like you do if I experienced what you have?
Well, that's a really powerful question. It forces us to confront our own biases and assumptions,
Uh,
to acknowledge that our worldview is heavily influenced by our own, like, unique experiences, and that those experiences are often just a tiny sliver of all the possible human experiences out there.
exactly. It's a call for humility, for curiosity, a willingness to step outside our own echo chambers, right? And try to understand the world through someone else's eyes.
Doesn't mean we have to agree with them
Mhm.
or condone, harmful beliefs, but it encourages us to approach those disagreements with a bit more compassion and curiosity, seeking to understand the underlying experiences that have shaped their perspectives.
Absolutely. And I think it's a message that's especially important in today's world, where it's so easy to retreat into our own tribes, surround ourselves with people who think exactly like we do, and demonize those who hold different views.
It's a reminder that growth and understanding often come from stepping outside of those comfort zones and engaging with people who challenge our assumptions and force us to see the world from a different angle.
And one of the things I love about Morgan Housel's writing is that he doesn't shy away from these challenging questions. He doesn't offer easy answers or simplistic solutions. Instead, he presents us with this framework for understanding the world, a set of timeless principles that can guide us as we navigate the complexities of human behavior and historical trends.
It's a reminder that history doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it often rhymes. By understanding the patterns of the past, the recurring themes of human behavior, we can gain valuable insights into the present and the future. We can recognize the echoes of past mistakes and perhaps find ways to avoid repeating them. We can see the enduring power of human resilience and draw inspiration from those who have, navigated hardship and emerged stronger on the other side.
And maybe, just maybe, we can make a slightly better decisions, navigate challenges with a bit more grace, and approach disagreements with a little more empathy and understanding.
So there we have it. Our deep dive into Morgan Housel's Same as It Ever Was. We've explored a wide range of themes, from the nature of risk and the power of expectations to the quirks of brilliant minds and the importance of embracing hardship.
It's a book packed with insights and thought-provoking questions, a book that challenges us to look beyond the surface and grapple with the enduring complexities of, human nature.
It's a great book. I highly recommend checking it out if you're interested in gaining a deeper understanding of the forces that shape our world and the timeless patterns that continue to influence our lives today.
And as you go about your day, your week, your year, remember that question that Housel leaves us with. What have you experienced that I haven't that makes you believe what you do? And would I think about the world like you do if I experience what you have? Let it guide your conversations, your interactions, and your understanding of the world around you.
Yeah. It's a question that can open doors to empathy, bridge divides, and help us navigate this messy, complex, and ultimately fascinating world with a bit more wisdom and compassion.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those tough questions.